The police perspective. How are police departments dealing with the aftermath of the Dallas tragedy? Well, a former NYPD official, he joins the panel to discuss. Also, the pastor at a Baptist church in Greenwich, who's also chaplain for the Greenwich Police Department, he's here to discuss police, community relations, and where we go from here. Then we'll look at how the presidential candidates are reacting and how people are reacting to President Obama's planned trip to Dallas tomorrow. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Well, tonight, Dallas police that will hold a large candlelight vigil for the officers killed in last week's tragic sniper attack. Now it comes as new information shows the ambush could have been, believe it or not, even worse. At the Dallas Police Department, this moment of silence for the fallen. Dozens of police academy cadets will one day put their lives on the line. They paid their respects. The investigation continues into the deadly mass shooting, and so do the threats to law enforcement.
We're all on edge. We're all on edge, and we're being very careful.
Dallas Police Chief David Brown says the sniper who took the lives of 5 police officers at a Black Lives Matter protest was planning a much bigger attack. He moved up his plans because of last week's police killings of 2 black men. Brown says a stockpile of bond-making materials found in his home is concerning.
The person obviously had some delusion. This person also was very committed to killing officers.
Investigators say the Army vet took self-defense courses and did tactical drills at his home before Thursday night's shooting. After Johnson's 2-hour standoff taunting officers, police sent a robot with a bomb to kill him. For the first time, his parents are speaking out in an interview with The Blaze.
I don't know what to say to make anything better. I didn't see it coming.
We're also hearing from doctors like Dr. Brian Williams, who worked to save lives Thursday night.
I abhor what has been done to these officers, and I grieve with their families.
Let's bring in our panel right now. Michael Murphy, he's a former lieutenant commander detective of the NYPD. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Thomas Nins, pastor for the First Baptist Church of Greenwich. He's also chaplain for the Greenwich Police Department. And Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. Gentlemen, thank you. I appreciate it. We're going to get into a lot of different things, so I'm going to try and just focus this block on the policing. And as mentioned before, the president, he'll be speaking to the nation from Dallas tomorrow at noon. But Lieutenant Detective, I get from a small sampling that in precinct houses across this country, not just in Dallas, there's a feeling that they're under siege right now. And while it's never easy being a cop, Dallas, and in a different way, even what happened today at a courthouse, albeit in Michigan, there's a sense that it's different than it's been in a long time, that the cops are targets. Am I overstating it?
I don't think you're overstating it at all. I think, you know, we go back to when Officer Lou and Officer Ramos in Brooklyn were assassinated a few years ago. That was after a similar type of incident with Eric Garner in Staten Island. We had some protests in March, and then somebody came up from Baltimore and assassinated 2 New York City police officers. Similar case here. We had the 2 shootings last week, and then we had the Dallas police officers murdered last Thursday. So I don't think you're overstating it. I think it's a threat. I think the officers are fully aware of it. I know the police departments and the chiefs are supporting their officers, are giving all the resources that they need for them to go out safely to do their shift when they begin.
You know, I saw that in the aftermath, immediately the NYPD decided that there were no more single tours. The guys were going to travel in pairs. When does the decision be made? You know, we're going to put on tactical gear right now, because I've heard it from both ways, which is all of a sudden if you got body armor and the shields and everything else, you're escalating the situation and let people know we're taking even a protest now much differently than we would have a year or so ago. But on the flip side, you know, I can see guys going into the precinct house. I'm not telling my guys to go out there, you know, with nothing but a uniform on. How do you make that kind of a calculation in this climate?
Well, the average patrol officer that's working out of a precinct is going out in his regular police officer. They're not wearing tactical gear. They're not wearing a Kevlar helmet with the vest on the outside and carrying long batons and long rifles. Those images are from the protests. So when these marches and these protests, the officers wear that tactical gear to be ready for any type of melee that could occur during it. As we know what happened recently after Baton Rouge, where one officer got hit with a brick and broke a vertebrae on his neck. So they wear that. That outfit is specifically worn only during the protests and the marches. Your regular patrol officers are just going out in their regular uniform of the day.
Pastor, you have a unique perspective on this. And I thought of you when I saw this because on one hand, you're the chaplain. You're in the precinct houses, you talk to the guys, you marry them, you baptize their kids, they come to you when they've got issues, concerns, etc. On the other end, your flock includes a lot of people who might be in those rallies or those protests saying that there's a different case of justice for a guy that looks like you than me. What has the last week been like in the conversations you've heard, especially as it relates to perceptions of law enforcement and law enforcement's perspective?
It's been tragic, it's been dramatic, it's been complex because emotions are all over the spectrum. And on the one hand, you have people who are grieving just for the loss of life. You have people who have lines drawn in their lives. We're on this side of the issue, we're on that side of the issue. I think it's like the impact of a car accident where suddenly from nowhere you feel this hit, and those who survive try to make sense of the fact that they did survive, and those who survive try to make sense of the loss of life. That's the convolution of emotion right now.
I want to play a clip, guys. This is from the police chief down in Dallas, and he admitted that today he was running on fumes, like, as you'd imagine, that entire police community has been, that they haven't had rest. But he was pressed on a couple of issues, one of which was that he believes too much is being asked of police, not just in Dallas, but everywhere right now. Every social ill, police are asked to either, have Narcan to treat the drug addicts when they're having an overdose. They're also asked to deal with the mentally ill, where we don't take care of them, we throw them out on the streets here. And on the other end, you've got body cameras recording every action. And I'm not defending the bad cops' actions, but his point was there was a lot asking. And then when pressed about the Black Lives Movement and the protests, he had this to say, and I'm curious your guys' reaction.
Become a part of the solution. Serve your communities. Don't be a part of the problem. We're hiring. We're hiring.
Dominic, I've heard of a range of reactions to that. Some saying, hey, you know what, if it's your neighborhood, and he went on to say, if you want to police in your neighborhood where you're a familiar face, community policing, whatever, we'll put you on the ground here and you can connect to the community. Other people saying, don't put this on the people who felt that you're 7 times more likely to be killed by a cop if you're black than white, that if you're not wearing a uniform, you're only an agitator. What was your reaction when you heard the chief?
Well, there are several ways to look at that, Richard. If we're talking about the NYPD, often a complaint that I hear from civil rights groups is that they will press to have minorities to take the exam, and perhaps they'll score reasonably well on the exam, do well on the physical, but the roadblock is the psychological exam. So it's easy to say join the force, but you still got to get past the psychological unit. The exam that it's, I guess you could explain it much better than what I'm trying to do, but where they go, where every NYPD officer, I'm talking about the NYPD, has to, in order to become a cop, you have to pass psychological services. And that's been a big stumbling block. So the police chief in Dallas, and he brings a very unique perspective. His son was killed by police officers. His partner was killed in the line of duty. He had a brother, he's had a lot of tragic occur in his life, and as we can see, a black police commissioner. Dallas has done remarkably well in reforms to aid the community, but this is a problem that's always right beneath the surface, and with any little thing it can explode, and that's exactly what happened. Is
it fair to say, you catch the scenes that we saw in Baton Rouge and in Minnesota, and I can do all the datelines, you probably know them better than I, where you must say as a cop, my God, what's that guy doing? He's making my job harder, or my guy's job's harder. When they're roughing up a guy or shooting a guy, when he asks him to get your license or registration, and then he shoots him when he goes for the glove compartment. So I can do all the cases, so can you. Right. But at the same end, try if you can to peel it back and just the real honest conversation in a precinct house when what do guys say to you saying, you know what, Mike, I don't need this in my life?
Well, they're going to look at these videos. I mean, of course, the police officers are going to look at these videos different than the public are going to look at them. They're going to look at these videos to see where the justification was. They're going to look for those things. A lot of them have been in situations like that, where the public hasn't been in a situation where you are fighting for your life or you're fighting someone who has a gun. I've been in a few in those situations. It's not a good situation to be in. Adrenaline takes over. So when I see situations, that's what I look for. But there are situations that are caught on video where there's no excuse for their behavior. And that does set us back. And it leaves you that little, you have that feeling in your stomach like, oh, not again. You've made some strides and then someone does something to embarrass the uniform. But the average cop will look to see where those cops did not do anything wrong first. That's what they'll look. If the video shows otherwise, they're honest about it, and they'll say it, and they'll know that now their job has become a little bit harder because of what that cop or those cops did.
Is there sympathy among police officers for the communities of color who feel like they're being singled out, or that they feel like they're being victimized and all this? And I guess the follow-up question is there enough sympathy coming from some of these police officers?
I believe that sympathy is there. I also believe that in the climate that we are in, that it's an us gets them mentality. It's the police here and the public over here. And I was listening to this interview by Chief Brown this morning, and prior to him making that statement, he made the statement that he grew up, in Dallas during the 80s during the crack epidemic, and he left college a year early because he wanted to do something for his community. He came back and became a police officer. So the divide is too far. It's just gotten too far. The cops do believe, and Chief Brown said, that the politicians, the media, seem to have it stacked up against the police in almost every case that happens, no matter what it is. We can't wait for the facts. There's always opinions right away, and that's what's out there with social media and 24-hour news coverage. People are giving their opinions. We wait for the facts, and sometimes it takes a day or two or a week for those facts to come out. That could change what happened a week ago, but you can't change the damage that happened in the meantime.
You're right in the middle. You got two constituency pastors that are giving you their two takes on it, and I'm curious, is it as bad as you've seen it in a long time? Or is it just the media will take a flashpoint and then 2 months later we're back where we were a few years ago?
No, right now it's worse than it has been before. And I agree with Mike and Dominic. It's so hot, it's so heated that even the opportunities for dialogue are limited because of all of the emotion and all of the passion. The worst thing that has happened in relationships between law enforcement and the community is YouTube. It's the worst thing that has happened, that someone can take a portion of an experience and put it up there. People who view it see it as the whole experience. And to what Mike was saying earlier, when law enforcement looks at it, we understand it's situation by situation. Members in the community aren't interested in situation by situation. And Dominic will attest to it. It all just looks like one thing. It looks like one thing over and over and over again, and that becomes the problem.
All right, when we come back, we're going to take a look at the state of race relations and also the relationship between police and communities of color. Ruud Giuliani had something to say that you're going to want to hear. We'll have that after this.